This ethics bill, the Democrats were saying it would just hold Supreme Court justices to the same ethics standards that I suppose you have in the Senate and the House supposedly has there. What do you make of that?
I voted against the bill for a number of reasons. Some of the proponents of the bill have said that the Supreme Court needs a code of conduct. That's not accurate. The Supreme Court has a code of conduct. You can go to uscourts.gov and read it.
A leaked memo blew the cover off the Supreme Court justices thwarting efforts to impose an actual enforceable code of ethics. The Times reported that the court's 9 justices started passing ultra-confidential memos kept in paper envelopes and off of email servers back and forth amongst themselves at the end of last summer.
I want to assure people that I am committed to making certain that we as a court adhere to the highest standards of conduct. We are continuing to look at things we can do to give practical effect to that commitment.
Chief Justice Roberts never wanted a code in the first place, and he said so, but he was forced to bend to public pressure when the many Supreme Court scandals that had previously been hidden from the public were eventually revealed, thanks to the journalism of places like ProPublica. Now, Neil Gorsuch stated in the memos that we now have access to that any guidelines or accountability could threaten the ability of justices to function independently. I don't know how, and certainly he's not saying, but that's the argument. And unsurprisingly, Samuel Alito and Clarence Thomas, what do you know, they agreed with him, asserting that the recent criticism of the court is all politically motivated and unfounded, and that the critics are beyond being pleased anyway, so why even bother?
We've had a lot of judges in American history at every level, the state level, the federal level, the trial level, the appellate level, who've done things wrong, right? We've had judges who have taken bribes and been impeached for it. We've had judges who have sexually harassed clerks. We've had judges who have engaged in party activity. We've had judges who've owned human beings as enslaved people. So there's nothing magic about being a judge or a justice. I mean, do any of you believe that there's some reason that we shouldn't have an ethics code that binds judicial officers the way we have binding ethics codes on legislative officers or executive officers? Is there any reason? Yeah. Mr. Aronson?
More than that, Ranking Member Raskin, I think there's reason to have higher standards for justices who are supposed to be impartial and to hold themselves above reproach. And as we've learned from this past year's devastating scandals, are very clearly not living up to that higher standard that they should be held to.
Yes. And how about you, Professor Shaw? Do you have any final thoughts for us on that?
I mean, I think that the rules of the road have basically been trust us. That's essentially been the representation that the justices have made. And I think the public has maybe been willing to make that bargain when they believe the justices comported themselves in a noble and honorable fashion consistent with the rule of law. I think there's every reason to believe that maybe that was never the case. It's certainly not the case now. And it seems there's a pressing need for some more formal mechanism than trust us to ensure the highest levels of ethics and our highest court. And it's certainly not the right time when we have such unequal justice coming out of the court in such sharp wealth inequality in society where people lead different kinds of lives. We made one poster, if somebody would put it up, I asked my staff to try to find out what's the average amount of money spent on a family vacation in the United States. I think we've got that someplace if somebody would get it, and I think it was around $3,000 if you go to Disney World for a long weekend with your family. Is that right? $2,840 is how much is spent on an average American family's vacation. One of Justice Thomas's 38 sugar daddy-sponsored vacations was more than $500,000. And I'm sorry, but if you're making $300,000 a year from the taxpayers, pay for your own damn vacation, right?
Democrats have been trying to roll out a code of ethics for the Supreme Court for years, and scandal after scandal shows us just how necessary that is.
On the finance side, the Finance Committee developed the information that the $250,000 loan for Justice Thomas's motor coach was never repaid. Some interest was paid, and then all payments stopped. And we continue to look into the final facts of what actually took place, but no principal on a $250,000 so-called loan appears ever to have been repaid. Harlan Crow appears to be playing tax games with the yacht that he took Justice Thomas around Indonesia on. in that in some places he called it a pleasure yacht. In some places he called it a charter yacht. We interviewed his crew who said they could never remember a charter, and yet he took millions of dollars in tax deductions as if it were a charter yacht. It looks a lot like a billionaire deducting the expense of operating his own toys, which is not what the tax code permits. So that remains under further investigation. The last piece, the Fourth Avenue, has been working with the Judicial Conference, with the other distinguished senior judges, chief judges from circuit and district courts, who are the oversight body for the judicial branch within the judicial branch. It is a body established by Congress to enforce laws passed by Congress, and they have given 2 victories for transparency and integrity that I think are very important. The first was to explode what I call the Scalia trick. The Scalia trick was to arrange for the owner of a private resort to invite Justice Scalia on a free vacation and then to fail to disclose the vacation on the theory that the free vacation gifted by the owner of the resort, whom he may never have met, was a personal invitation. And as a personal invitation, it therefore amounted to personal hospitality and needn't be disclosed. We believe he took over 60 of these free arranged vacations. The Judicial Conference took a look at that and blew it to smithereens because they know perfectly well that would never fly in any circuit court or in any district court in the country. The second victory for transparency and integrity there, if you go back to my description of how the court capture scheme worked, it involved communicating to the justices what it was that the billionaire interest wants through these flotillas of front group amici, who would then not disclose who was really behind them. In one occasion, a brief was filed by an entity which is not even a real corporate entity. It was the fictitious name under Virginia corporate law for a separate corporate entity under which fictitious name that other corporate entity had registered to do business. They didn't even disclose to the court and to the other parties who the real corporate entity was for whom this was the fictitious name. And just last week, the Judicial Conference announced its new rule demanding significantly more, its new proposed rule, I should say, demanding significantly better disclosure. So the bad news is that we have a rogue court that has been captured by special interests and that is over and over again in appalling pattern continuing to follow the direction of the billionaires and the front group through which they operate. The good news is that the public is fed up. Congress is fed up, mostly. And the Judicial Conference is beginning to tighten up the rules on the Supreme Court justices.
This wildly partisan Supreme Court lays bare the limitations on the separation of powers. With Republicans practically at the helm of every branch of government, certainly every branch that counts, and with very few members of the GOP still remaining that are willing to challenge or speak out against Donald Trump, he's going to be wielding unprecedented power when he's inaugurated on January 20th. And the highest court in the land will almost certainly enjoy another 4 years of near total impunity. They're going to be able to be as corrupt as they want to be because Donald Trump's not going to provide a check on them, and they now know that they're not going to be required by the public or by the Senate to do anything else. And it can feel pointless, I know, tracking the indiscretions of people who are not going to face justice. I know that personally because that's largely what my job is. But we've got to hold these people accountable, if only in the court of public opinion. Vergonia is, after all, a very powerful tool, and it might be our single tool remaining. Thanks for watching our video. Did you know that you can support our show by becoming a subscriber? Just click the subscribe button and also ring the bell so that you get notifications when we're live or when we post new content.